Good evening, guys. So it's the third day for me in beautiful Delft. This was my Delft view from outside my hotel, helped only a little bit by AI, and amazing place to be in. And I think I'm out of my jet lag, so we should be fine. I'm at Arizona State University, and I've been in AI for quite a long time, probably older than many of you, actually. In terms of your age. This is my bachelor's thesis back in 1983, before laser printers were invented, and we were doing speech recognition. And now I work in Arizona State University with some of my students who you may have seen giving talks and so on. So what's interesting is that when I started getting interested in AI, this sort of crazy hype about AI was not a reality at all. Most of the time, as I was a grad student, I was being told, why the heck are you in AI? I mean, there are people writing books about why AI enterprise is a gone case and we should be doing something better with your life. In fact, I used to think of this as physicists and philosophers united against AI. I still completed my grad study, and then I walked right into the AI winter. This was from one of those AI winter last ice age with Steve Chen. So we basically, one of the good things about winters is that they keep you fresh, and we are still as young as before. Some of us have more hair, but you'll see that. Well, things have changed a little bit now, right? So we are in an artificial intelligence hype cycle. This is just a plot of the number of companies that started mentioning the word AI in their earnings reports. So if you don't mention the word AI, you may as well close the company and go away. That's the way it's become right now. Obama, just a couple of years back, said, my successor will govern a country, USA, being transformed by AI. Many of us agree that, in fact, we are being transformed by an AI rather than a real president, but still, it's basically there. Now, I'm not complaining about all this hype. Where else do you get to be on these kind of stages and be on TV and so forth? And then, of course, the hype and the interest has also reached, kind of historic proportions. AI has been compared to new electricity. It's been compared to something bigger than fire and electricity. It's been compared to God, or it's been seen to be God. And then some people have also been worried a little bit about AI. It's apparently a bigger threat than North Korea, especially since AI hasn't yet shaken hands with Trump. And then AI could be the worst event in the history of civilization, and AI is likely to destroy humans. Now, this sort of interest in AI, I take it sort of reluctantly as something that I have promised to bring forward, because as the president of CPAIOR, I did say that I want to make AI great again, and I think I did. But I'm still worried about this whole issue of robots taking over and so on, and so I'm hedging my bets by going once in a while to NASA and trying to find ways of getting out of this planet before robots take over. But enough of that. What I really want to talk about quickly today, and I know it's a mix-up audience, some of you know a lot more AI than I do, some of you are actually truly coming to find out what's going on in AI. So I want to just sort of briefly touch on three pieces. What just happened? Why all this sudden interest in AI? It's not a field that just started yesterday. It turns out it has an actual birth date in 1956. And what has suddenly changed? And also, are we done? Is AI as an enterprise completely over because we have achieved our goals? And then and as part of that, I talk about a little bit of significant thresholds that are still left, and in particular about challenges of human-aware AI systems. And then finally, assuming hopefully the time permits, we'll talk a little bit also about how do we manage risks and rewards of current AI technology. That's a huge amount of area there itself. Okay, so if you start thinking about AI, this is, if you take Intro to AI courses, you basically think of AI as this discipline of designing intelligent agents that look at the world, have models of the world, reason about the models as well as the sensory information, and do an action in the world. I know many of you are planning audience, and I always felt planning is really the whole point of intelligent agency, because you have to act in the world. So this is, the sort of the goal of the AI enterprise. And when I give these sort of talks to, in particular, general audiences, I find that it's extremely useful to realize that there are, in fact, many intelligences for humans too. In particular, we have babies coming into this world with the ability to see the world, perceive the world, ability to manipulate it, grasp, put everything in your mouth, and so on. Then the babies get emotional intelligence. Then they acquire some social intelligence, get along with their friends. Then finally, they start doing these cognitive reasoning tasks, SATs, or whatever is the crazy exam that you have in your culture, and then go to school, right? This is how the intelligence sort of seems to kind of go in babies. Now keep that in mind, and if you look at the AI's progress towards intelligence, are showing signs of intelligence, it turns out that it's almost went the opposite way. In 1980s, the last time around, there was a huge, big interest in AI. It was actually expert systems or rule-based systems for many businesses. And believe me, everything that's been said here, a version of that has been said back in 1980s, as to how it's going to change everything. Then there is, in 90s, we had reasoning systems, including the Deep Blue that dethroned Kasparov. And in more recently, we started making improvements and big strides in perceptual tasks. Speech recognition has become commonplace, image recognition has improved significantly, and that's the thing that in some sense is guiding all the significant interest in AI. Currently, in some sense, of course, research-wise, connecting these various facets is a very important issue, but be that as it may, just understanding that and understanding that human intelligence, the science of it, at least in human babies, go in one direction, where AI sort of went the other direction, is something quite useful. In fact, if there is one slide that you want to take a picture of, take this one. It explains a lot. Because why did AI develop in this reverse way? It turns out that it's easier to program computers about tasks for which you have conscious theories. Okay? And it's, of course, we have conscious theories about how to play chess, how to, for example, run a company, and so on and so forth. And so that's where we wound up programming the computers. We actually don't know how we see the world. We have no conscious theories of how the perception works. And so in some sense, we have to do what the human babies do, which is hang around being cute and all for about years on, trying to suck up all the examples and try to figure out how to perceive the world. So in some sense, the fact that we went in this direction is not surprising, because we don't have conscious theories of many of the tasks that are with respect to perception. But at the same time, it's important to remember that we do have conscious theories for many tasks. And ignoring that and trying to say, I'll just learn everything from scratch is also kind of crazy. Okay, and also, why did AI catch public imagination now? Well, early AI was a blind and deaf Socrates. The fact that Deep Blue, beat Kasparov didn't really change your life every day. Whereas now, with your cell phones, your voice recognition technologies, your image recognition, and so on, everybody is able to understand, get some fruits of AI, even if it's not all the aspects of intelligence. And that, of course, winds up making it much more accessible. And it also, of course, people suddenly start seeing AI everywhere, and this leads to, of course, many misperceptions in the public too. So now, of course, I should mention, that one of the big technologies that has, made the perceptual intelligence, the strides in perceptual intelligence possible right now, has been neural networks. This is a technology that's been around, it's been invented many years back. It was basically given up for dead for many years. And then what changed really is not as much the theory, but the main thing that changed is the infrastructure for capturing the data and infrastructure for, basically processing it in various types of machine learning systems, including supervised learning, has been separately built. My joke is that if those of you who have seen Blade Runner, if you go back and see it, you would be surprised how much they got wrong about future. They still think that the cell phones will be these huge big things, that the TVs will be like bricks. While you think about one direction, society actually, progresses in multiple directions, and that's something, the orthogonal progress in the society actually helped, in the success of these neural network technologies. There are, of course, variety of neural networks. Of course, I'm not going into those particular details, but some impressive feats from a perceptual intelligence point of view and also at least basics, beginnings of putting perception to action that have caught people's imagination include, of course, better than human accuracy on image recognition. Apparently, there are 200 types of dogs on ImageNet, and of course, I don't know who has a life will be able to differentiate between 200 types of dogs, and so I'm not surprised that AI systems are actually much better at it, but in general, the image recognition accuracy has increased, and that has sort of translated into kind of reading things like X-rays and so on, radiology and so on, and so that's been a very big advantage. Ability to clone voice, ability to generate images. So apparently these particular set of things, some of them are real actresses and actors, and some are just imagined. Like when you dream up faces that you actually don't necessarily connect to anybody, but it's just your mind made up. And that's the sort of thing that is possible with generative adversarial networks, for example. And of course, very impressive progress in perception to action in AlphaGo as well as multiplayer games like Dota that just happened like yesterday. They're showing that, in fact, we are able to beat human teams. So those are all very impressive, but I hope you remember by this time still that sort of coming from perceptual intelligence and making big strides there, and that in fact there are varieties of intelligences, and then you need to actually make the ability to integrate the progress in all of them are important. So that gets us to the second part. Are we done? So if we beat Go players and if we beat Dota players, what else is left really? I mean, after all, we have very boring lives, and that seems to be like the height of civilization, so we should be done, right? So I want to talk a little about that. So of course there is a bit of irrational exuberance. There was this old Archimedes thing saying that if you give me a lever and a place to stand, I can lift the world. And so the version of that for AI, especially for neural networks, is give me a big enough GPU, large enough data set, and deep enough network, I will recreate super intelligence. Okay, and of course it's the public media is not helping. In fact, they're writing a story after story about how AI is going to take over. Hollywood has always told you that this was going to happen, Terminator movies and so on. The only difference is now New York Times and whatever are the major national publications are also pushing this kind of a line. Now, one of the interesting things is this also, given this is a large number of you are obviously a technical audience, in the field itself, this has had an intellectual fallout in terms of the change in the directions in terms of going, making these improvements in perception. And I actually gave a talk about this some time back, but I want to focus on one specific thing which is near and dear to a lot of audience here, which is symbols versus neurons. So one of the founding principles in AI has been this Newell and Simon's physical symbol system hypothesis, that a physical symbol system has the necessary and sufficient means for general intelligent action. Interestingly, right now, all these speedy improvements in perception with no symbolic background has actually made people question whether or not symbolic reasoning, how is that going to connect to perceptual reasoning. So in fact, of course, Jeff Hinton is famously said, symbols are but the luminiferous ether of AI. So this is stuff that we seem to imagine, but you don't really need it. This is an interesting a thing to keep in mind, and that gets me to the second slide that I hope some people will take pictures of, which is this data versus doctrine tension that's going on in AI. There is an amateur philosopher and polymath called Polanyi who has mentioned at one point of time, as many people did, that we know more than we can tell. We subconsciously know a lot more than we can consciously actually give theories of. This is just a version of what I said earlier too. However, if you have conscious theories, you can program them. If you only know subconsciously, then you can't program, you have to learn from the behavior. One of the interesting things is that much of the recent progress, at that time when he said this, he was bemoaning the fact that most of the progress that anybody ever cared about has been in these conscious theories. And so he wrote this book called Tacit Dimension. And now, interestingly, now we are almost in the opposite end, where all the recent progress in AI has been on the tacit knowledge, basically looking at pictures, hearing voices, and figuring out what they are. Recent advances in AI have made AI synonymous with learning from massive amounts of data, actually, as it's been said just before, during the introduction. That's not too surprising because that's what the papers are talking about a lot. But obviously, symbolic knowledge did help very significantly for us. In fact, if you, for example, join a company and they say there's a set of standard operating procedures and then please read this up and start following them. And you say, no, I don't need to read any stinking manuals. That's all symbolic. I would like to just watch you for about 2 million times and then figure out for myself exactly how this company works. As facetious as it looks, that's the pure database approach. Just see the behavior and do the Nike's just do it kind of intelligence, which works for vision because we have no better theories. But there are many other areas we do have starting theories, and it would be very useful to keep that in mind. In fact, one of the hallmarks of human intelligence seems to be the seamless interplay of tacit and explicit knowledge. We are able to combine both of them, and that's something that AI, as going forward, has to actually put that together. So right now, of course, the pendulum has swung from all models are wrong, some are useful, which is a classic engineering dictum, to what are models? Why do you need models? Why don't you just give me data? The first question that people ask you in AI, if you say you are working in AI, is what data do you use? Whereas if you are an engineer, they'll say, what models do you use? And that's a big pendulum shift that we want to keep in mind. And then, in fact, realize that models are important. The beautiful talk that was given yesterday by Derek Long, one of our colleagues here, who was actually doing drilling operation support in Schlumberger et al. And imagine Schlumberger et al. Saying, I will support your drilling operations, we'll just need examples. And then we'll somehow figure out your standard operating procedures from the ground up. That may well be possible approach in a sort of an asymptotic way, but it's highly inefficient because there are people willing to give you these standard operating procedures. And this is where model-based reasoning could quite help. One other thing that you keep hearing about with respect to AI is this interpretability. I don't understand what's going on. Now, of course, much of the progress in AI recently has been in perceptual intelligence. And so when you say, I see a dog, nobody asks you, explain yourself. Either they also see a dog or they think you are a madman and put you in a hospital, right? Whereas if on the other hand you say, I think the best way for our company to progress is this and this, they'll say, explain yourself. There are certain things for which we want explanations, certain things we don't expect explanations because there is no models that we can speak in terms of. So a feature or bug, deep networks learn their own representations. If you learn their own representations, they may not make sense to you at all. In fact, as Wittgenstein said famously, even if a lion could speak, you could not understand him, because conversation requires shared models, okay? And so if I just learn my own representations, then how am I going to communicate with you? Now, if the point of AI is to come up with robots that take over the world, and like in that old movie, we are all going to some other planet and hang around, then this is fine. But if the point of AI is that you want the systems to work with us, then we need shared models and shared vocabulary, and that's something to keep in mind. So, of course, one other challenge is without models, you sometimes get into this worry about failure modes and when exactly does the system fail and why does it fail. Some classic examples that some of you are already aware of is these visual fallacies that many of the neural networks right now have. That's being very carefully studied right now. So, for example, for those of you who haven't seen this, so there is a school bus. I add some portion of this noise to the school bus. So you get this, which, as many of you can see, is an ostrich, right? Clearly an ostrich. And then there is a dog, and you add some little bit of noise, and again, an ostrich. Okay, now this is all fine and dandy. I'm from South India, and there has to be something sacrosanct about temples. Apparently, you add temple some noise, it too becomes an ostrich, right? Now, it's possible that unbeknownst to us, the world is full of ostriches. But let's also not get carried away. We do have visual fallacies ourselves. This is a picture that was taken in our favorite immigration country, Norway, a couple of months back, where, as you can see, this is a city bus picture, and some people started basically, some right-wing crazy zealots started saying, oh my God, we need to stop these burqa-clad Muslim women from taking over Norway, right? Now, you may think that these bozos are, racist, bigots, etc. But you can almost see why they thought these innocuous city bus seats are burqa-clad women. Okay? Some of you who haven't seen that, oh my God, you're in trouble. But the point is that we do have visual fallacies, but we have some sense of our failure modes. After I explain to you that, hey, this is a city bus seat, you kind of see it. Whereas the previous one where I explained to you this other thing is an ostrich, you still couldn't see the ostrich. Why? Because your failure modes have nothing to do with the way network has learned to recognize these images. And this is something that we need to be careful about if we are going to put these machines in critical situations. So the other thing that I want to mention a little is the thresholds that are left to reach general human level intelligence. Of course, again, as an AI guy, this is the greatest time to be alive. Everybody is talking about my area, and, we basically have made great progress in, one area that we haven't done before, which is perceptual intelligence. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything has been taken care of. There are several things that are still to be done. These are big-time challenges, some of which are common sense, incompleteness, sample-efficient learning, and human-aware AI, which is one of the things that I spent a little more time on. So, in terms of common sense, the still elusive common sense, my favorite example, this is the time of the talk where there is a pop quiz. So, Explorer Magellan went around the world 3 times. One of the trips, he died. Which trip did he die? Some of you are having trouble, but the rest of you kind of are laughing. Why did he even bring up this question? This is common sense. This is being able to effortlessly complete the knowledge that is missing in a specification. Okay? We have that. Machines obviously still haven't gotten it, and we have to figure out how to get common sense to work. And of course, there's another version of this is Vinograd Schema Challenge, which they put up as a competition recently. And these are great examples here. These are challenges. This doesn't necessarily mean that these will always be insurmountable challenges. I'm just trying to tell you everything is not over yet. So the Vinograd Schema Challenge, there are 2 sentences. The women stopped taking pills because they were pregnant. The women stopped taking pills because they were carcinogenic. In one case, the pregnancy is about women. The other case, the carcinogenic nature is not necessarily about the women, but about pills. And you have no trouble figuring that out. Again, this is something that we use from common sense. And that's very useful for systems to have so that we can have fruitful interactions with them. The other thing is sample efficient learning. Learning is great. But human learning is highly sample efficient. You almost have never shown a billion examples of anything. If in fact more than 3 examples are shown to my students, they get bored to death. And if I have to show more than 1 example, I get bored to death. So the whole of human learning basically works with very few examples, with background knowledge being brought to bear on that examples. This knowledge-based learning is something that we haven't yet figured out how to do quite well. So in fact, John McCarthy, who actually gave this field the name artificial intelligence, has talked about this advice taker, which will be able to get just simple examples, a simple advice, and will be able to operationalize it. And we are far from getting to that point. Incompleteness is another big thing. Even if you have models or knowledge, many a time the world is open world, and we have incompleteness in our models. And in fact, some of that might be known unknowns, some of them might be unknown unknowns, as our favorite philosopher and defense secretary, Don Rumsfeld, once pointed out. And the question of how to reason with these incompleteness and this open worldness is very important direction. My own group has done some beginnings of this work over years in these directions. And the last thing I wanted to mention in this set of things is AI is getting along with humans, human-aware AI. Now, the funny thing is AI has always had a curious ambivalence to humans. We apparently want to help humans, but the things that we seem to be happiest doing is being on Mars. So Steve Chen will try to tell you that AI is helping on space. AI was always helping on space. It could not get along with us, so on space it is much happier. If at all we try to deal with AI, it's like, people are like this. Okay, so it's like Garry Kasparov being beaten, the poker playing, we beat the humans in poker play, we beat humans in AlphaGo, and we do all this and we are surprised that why is public afraid of AI? Are you kidding me? You want to help humanity, it's the people you just can't stand, said John Lennon, and I sometimes think he might be describing AI as a field. So the question is, why don't we work on AI systems? Why don't we have headlines like this, breaking news, AI helps an old lady cross street, and just sort of hangs out without drama, right? Now, clearly this is fake news, you know this. And my question is, why is it a fake news? Why aren't we working on that more? One of the long-standing worries in the field is that somehow working on these kinds of humans and machines working together is some kind of a cheating of the big dream. You know, after all, the original mechanical Turk had an actual Turk inside this mechanical contraption who was having all the intelligence. Right? So the worry was, let's keep humans as far away from my system as possible so that nobody can accuse me of cheating. But that ship has sailed. We know how to do many tasks. And in fact, working, the kind of brains we have, we didn't need the size of brains to run away from the tigers of Bengal or the lions of Savannah. We needed him to deal with each other, talking about what are they thinking and how do we strategize against each other or for each other and cooperate as well as antagonize. Right? So this is actually AI writ large. It's a much bigger problem working with humans than working on Mars. You know, it turns out, as any of you who are not married can probably, realize. Okay, so I did actually give a long talk about this in February on IIAI as part of a presidential address on the challenges of these kinds of designing these kinds of human-aware AI systems. You know, if you're interested, you can look at that. But I want to just bring up a couple of highlights on that. So even this picture I showed you in the beginning, which is an intelligent agent, every little box of it changes once you have humans in the loop. Because you have to model their mental state, and you have to not only care about how your actions affect the environment, but also how do they affect the mental state of the humans in the loop. And that's what actually the collaboration, cooperation, and deception, and everything that we take for granted as dealing with humans wind up coming. So in particular, teaming, this is a couple of my videos, teaming requires modeling the human, of course, the theory of mind, and the ability to recognize what is it that the human in the loop is trying to achieve, what are they trying to achieve, and so that we can try to help them or hinder them, both of which are possible. And then also intention projection. If you're trying to do something with humans in the loop, you want to tell them where you're going, just as we try to tell each other. And the machines to provide those kinds of intention projection winds up being very important. And you know, those are challenges that are working on, and some of which we are looking at. Other thing, in fact, the second order version is teaming not only requires modeling the human's mind, but modeling humans' understanding of your capabilities. In fact, the whole issue of explainable behavior is about what do you think you expect me to do. If I, for example, sort of effortlessly fall down from here, I assume that many of you would be surprised. Why did he do that? That's because I have an understanding of your model of what I am supposed to be doing here, and I'm trying to be explicable. Even though I have this urge to jump, I stop myself. Okay? For the benefit of, communication. Now, it turns out that sometimes explicability is very hard. So if a huge big bee came and started biting me, I would like to jump. At which point I jump, yelling, saying, hey, a bee is biting me. That's because I understand that my model of the world is different from your model, where you think that I have certain capabilities in certain predicaments, and my predicaments have changed. I'm trying to tell you what changed. So explanation really is about reconciling two different models, your model as well as the human's model of your capabilities. And this winds up being an important research direction that we've been working on. In fact, there's a bunch of papers on this here too, but again, these are things that are important from the human-aware AI perspective. It turns out this whole explicability and explanation can be traded off. You might do some amount of what people expect you to do, and you say, heck with it, I'll start talking. And in fact, there are sexist ways of doing this where apparently one sex, mine, finds explicable behavior better than actually talking. At least that's what the stereotype has us saying. Okay? So the question of do you explain or do you just do what people expect you to do is there's a trade-off there that we would have to deal with. And of course, there's a whole bunch of papers that our own little group is doing, and these are some of the ones that my students presented here. You're welcome to look at them. So that gets to the last part. In fact, I have time to get to the last part, which is surprising to me. But probably I spoke 4 times the normal speed, so that's okay. So how do we manage the risks and rewards of AI technology? So intelligence is the ultimate dual-use technology. All technology can be dual-use technology. There is no such thing as technologies can only be used for good. Humans tend to decide how to use them, right? Intelligence, of course, is the thing that we take the most pride in, and it's the ultimate dual-use technology. So you can, on the good side, AI can help in conversational jobs, AI can help in translational jobs, AI can help in successful human-AI cooperation. That's all good stuff, although I don't know why I put it in red. But then, on the bad side, AI can generate reality that may actually not be reality, and that can basically get you into, people, manipulating you. You can actually, AI can increase societal biases. There's something that we'll talk about in a minute. And of course, AI can lead to large-scale societal disturbances, just as many technologies do. But of course, one thing that we took for granted is our cognitive abilities, and AI might be able to automate that, and that could lead to unemployment, sorts of things. This is the kind of stuff that, of course, Elon Musk is worried about, existential threat. AI can take over the world and, they'll basically kill us all. I'm not as worried about it. In fact, the other 3, that's much more interesting and worrisome, and we can actually design systems. Again, I think of AI as a future we are inventing. And we get to actually, we have control. We are not just spectators. By choosing the problems we work on, we get to control the future. We are not just spectators. So dangers of existing AI as it's going forward, bias and manipulation is something that we need to be worried about. Obviously data is being collected by everybody. And you guys have made a huge big stop to it. Now, of course, you can't even see the internet because there are all these GDPR questions, and then so I give up and I go to some other thing. So in fact, I'm having more productive time because I don't go on the internet. But the important thing is that this data being collected can be used against you. And some countries have already started doing this. China, for example, has done this social credit system, which some of us are obviously probably worried about, both in China and outside, as to how it can be misused. So, in fact, there are some examples. This was a technical paper that was submitted to a vision conference just a couple of years, last year or something, where, you just take a whole bunch of human images, some of which who have actually been shown to be criminals, in the sense they've been caught and they've been put in jail, and some who haven't been, and train your normal 150-layer connet to see what the heck can happen. And apparently, you can get 95% accuracy. Why do we need courts anymore? Right? Now, you might think, oh, that's China. Well, this is Israel. Israeli facial imaging company claims to identify terrorists and pedophiles just based on faces. Now, this is stuff that we need to be worried about. So, in fact, I thought, might as well make lemonade with lemons. And so when I was teaching my AI class, I made this new AI-based grading scheme. I had people's pictures, so I trained a convenet to decide what their grade should be. And so that somewhat short-circuited the whole system. As a professor, talking is easy, grading is hard. So this was, AI being useful. But this point makes you think, those of you who are students might think, who cares about, convicts being caught left or right? But you might care about your grades. And do you really believe that your facial expressions have anything to do with your grades? And just because the system was able to predict on some number of examples, do you care about the false positive costs, which are ultimately borne by the society rather than by yourself? Those are important ethical considerations which AI probably was interested, as AAA used to be interested in AI and ethics, and people used to laugh at us saying, why do you care? Because your technology doesn't work. Now everybody is very worried that if we need to think about ethics in AI, and that's something that we want to take about. I want to mention that people keep talking about algorithmic bias. I hate that word. Algorithms are not the biased ones. Oftentimes the bias comes from the data. So for example, there's this crazy example of Samsung making cameras that when you're taking pictures, they have this blink detection feature. Right, and of course, then basically the blink detection was saying for most Asians that they're blinking, blinking, blinking. Now, do you believe that Samsung, which is an Asian company, wanted to be racist against Asians? No. It's just that it trained its data based on Western images, and that wound up being a problem. And this one is Joy Bellomy and her colleagues basically showed that currently just gender recognition from faces is low precision if it is anybody other than Caucasians. And it's actually even low, it's low even also if it is Caucasian women. It just because if you open the images and if you train the data mostly winds up being Caucasian and mostly male. And so we need to think about how to change the world where the data that's available is actually not biased. That's a harder problem. It's so much easier to just complain about algorithms. But really what needs to change is AI puts a mirror to the society, and you need to decide whether you like the society you live in. The fake reality is going to be a huge problem too. There's this old saying that Charlie Chaplin, basically, you took part in the Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest and would come in second. In future, all of you would take part in this Charlie Chaplin contest, and you will be a poor imitation of yourself because somebody else can fake you much better. And that's something we do have to worry about. In terms of employment, again, that's a huge issue. People are thinking about this. One little point that I want to get across is it's not the usual white collar versus blue collar. It turns out it's not cognitive versus manual. It is routine versus non-routine. Any routine job, even if it's white collar, is likely to be easily automated before any non-routine job is. And so that might actually lead to a reevaluation of the societal values. We, for some reason, pay huge salaries to lawyers and very little salaries to people who take care of the sick and elderly. When machines do law, then we might pay more to the people who take care of people. Okay, so that might change the way society itself works. So the organization I represent, CPAIOR, actually started having a conference on AI and ethics and society along with ACM. The first one was held just last year, and the second one is going to be held in Hawaii, which is a good place. You should come. And then I'm also part of Partnership for AI, which is this industry consortium, industry nonprofit consortium that's looking into best practices for AI. And these are their thematic pillars, and you notice these thematic pillars sort of talk about all these issues. We looked at safety critical AI, fair, transparent, and accountable AI, collaborations between people and AI systems, AI, labor and economy, societal and social influences, AI for social good, and so on. So these are things that people are taking seriously. So those of you who are worried that are AI people at all caring about this, no, there is some work towards taking these things seriously. So that's my agenda today. In summary, having made the most progress on the declarative tasks, the ones for which we have conscious theories for, AI systems in recent years have found significant success in learning tacit knowledge from data. Now, because we did this doesn't mean that nothing else matters. It means that this also has been done. Now we have to figure out how to combine these pieces. So this had some interesting intellectual ramifications to the field. We are still far from a general intelligence. Significant threshold remain to be crossed. There will be an ICAPS next year. There will be a CPAIOR next year. It's not over yet. And then AI, of course, remains a potent tool as well as a weapon. And the new breakthroughs and perception, of course, present some immediate worries, and we do need to take into that account. So that's where I'm going to stop, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for a great talk. There's time for 2 or 3 questions with a short answer.
Short question first.
Anyone? Or while they're thinking, perhaps, may I conclude from your talk that AI should be more like humans, that we should also understand humans better before we...
No, all I'm saying is if AI needs to get along with us, it seems to me crazy for me to develop technology that requires me to change, not the technology to change. In planning, we had this whole idea called mixed initiative planning, which involved humans becoming planners, going into the search queues and manipulating nodes. Humans should have better things to do in life, like, for example, taking a nice bike ride, rather than manipulating the search queues of a planner. So all I want is, if the system should get into our land, and that actually poses lots of interesting research questions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, hi. How far do you think are we from the general artificial intelligence?
So so the thing that I find very useful to understand is narrow super intelligence already exists. machines are better at doing multiplication. Machines are also better, apparently, at looking at 200 different kinds of dogs. The thing that we have is this flexibility. We are not great at recognizing dogs are doing multiplication, but we can do all of these together. It's not at all clear scientifically how far we are. I pointed out some of the big challenges. So we did do like a poll of the AAAI fellows as to when superintelligence will come, and as Elon Musk says, the world will end. And the numbers varied, of course, but the minimum was 50 years. So it's time to raise a good family, and then, the world will be gone. But my point is, it's very hard to predict future, and this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow, as you would read in New York Times or whatever are the papers you're reading, because there are some really big, difficult problems to be handled. That doesn't mean that AI systems can't kill you. Guns can kill you, and they have no intelligence whatsoever. Okay?
A last question? Yeah. Sorry, Steve.
Hi. What are some of the promising ways to reduce the amount of samples or reduce the amount of data that is required to create well-performing neural networks or machine learning?
Again, that's a great research question. If I know the answers, I'll be writing papers, lots of them. But some areas that I'm asking my students to look at is start with partial models and then go from there and in evaluating the examples. The closest that anything from the perception community has come on that direction is these truncated neural networks, right? But the problem, of course, is those are all mostly for visual features. And what you really need is background knowledge that to some extent is symbolic in nature, because different domains have very different features that matter. And AI has worked towards that at some points of time. Those ideas didn't work out at that time. For example, explanation-based learning is one. It's been reinvented recently under certain areas. So for example, a guy called Brendan Lake, I just found that he became a TR35 guy, MIT TR35 guy. And his most recent work, like last year or something, essentially brings explanation-based learning ideas into the context of statistical learning techniques. So those are ideas that might work.
Now, thanks again.
Okay.